Hey everybody, this is Mr. Storm, and in this video we're going to talk about oral presentations and how to give an effective oral presentation. This is incredibly important because you, my friend, are going to give an oral presentation in the next couple of weeks. So let's get started. So giving an oral presentation, it's a critical business skill. A lot of jobs require you to present facts or speak in a meeting, things like that. And so you need to cultivate this skill as early as possible. This skill demonstrates your competence and professionalism. Oral presentations exercise every communication skill that we've been practicing over the last couple of weeks. So let's dive in and learn how to present our ideas in the most clear and professional way. So talk to the audience. Now, by this, I don't mean you just face the audience, which, I mean, that is important. And you do want to make eye contact with as many people in your audience as possible. What I mean is prepare presentations that meet your audience where they are. Okay, so what do I mean by that? Well, if I'm giving a presentation for people who have let's say, a novice understanding of the subject, I'm not going to give them an expert level presentation, right? I'm going to try to speak to them at their level. Be sure you know who your audience is. What are their backgrounds? What are their knowledge levels of the material you're presenting? What are they hoping to get out of your presentation? Are you trying to convince them of something? Okay, that's one way. Are you just trying to inform them of something? That's another consideration. When presentations go off topic, people start tuning out. They don't want to hear your personal story that's 10, 15 minutes long in the middle of a presentation that has nothing to do with what you're talking about. Understand that your audience is there as a favor to you. Think about it like that, right? They're there as a favor to you, and you want to do as good of a job as you can so that you don't feel like you've wasted their time, okay? Less is more. A common mistake of inexperienced presenters is just to say too much, all right? They just feel like they need to prove how much they know about a subject by talking about it a lot and saying a bunch of words that aren't necessary. So as a result, the main message of that presentation ends up getting lost in all this extra mumbo jumbo that doesn't need to be there, okay? Your knowledge of the subject is best expressed through clear and concise presentation. A side effect of too much material is that you will talk too quickly and people will stop paying attention and they'll lose your message entirely. Make sure there's a take-home message in your presentation. Think about what you want them to remember, okay? There should be about 3 points of information that you want them to remember from your presentation. Hammer those points. Tell them at the beginning of the presentation, these are the 3 things that you're going to remember and as you're going through. This is something you're going to remember later. Like, explicitly tell them, or, if that feels a little bit too corny for you, there are ways to work this in, but this is, these 3 points, 1, 2, 3 key points are the things they should remember. If I ask someone later, like 20 minutes later, hey, what was the thing that you remembered about that presentation? Or what did you get away from, what did you take away from that presentation? They should be able to list 1 or 2 things that they remember, okay? Make it memorable. And make sure the memorable parts are important parts you want them to remember, not that super funny meme that you put in the slide that had nothing to do with what you were talking about. Be logical. Think of your presentation as a story. You're telling them a story, right? There's a flow. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end. So you need to set the stage, okay? Tell them what they're going to hear. And then you tell them the story, which is the middle part of your presentation. And then you have a big finish, a climax, something that happens at the end to kind of wrap it all up, right? Again, remember your 3 takeaways that you want them to remember from your presentation, and make sure that is very clear in your wrap-up. Every word in your presentation should have a reason to be there. Keep it simple, all right? Do not put too much information on your slides. Treat the floor like a stage. Presentation should be entertaining, okay? Now, you don't want to jump around on stage like it's a, like it's a rap concert, okay? But you do want to kind of move around a little bit. If you're not a funny person, don't try to put jokes in your presentation. Nothing kills the momentum of a presentation more than a joke that does not land, okay? You feel awkward, they feel awkward for you, and it just derails the whole thing. If you're not good at telling stories, don't try to tell stories, right? Stick to what you're good at. Move around the room a little bit and work the audience the way that you uniquely can, okay? A good entertainer will captivate the audience and increase the likelihood of the audience remembering the main points of the presentation. Remember, that's the whole point of something like this. We're giving an oral presentation because we're trying to transmit information into people's brains and have them remember that information. So if they don't have takeaways that they're remembering from that presentation, then you've just wasted their time. Practice. This is important, especially if you have a time limit for your oral presentation, like we do for the oral presentation you're going to give this next couple weeks. So practice your presentation at home. Before you give it, go through your presentation, give your presentation in the mirror at home, make sure you time it. Practice what you want, or practice the best way to give the presentation, and then stick to your practice. Stick to what you've practiced when you present it. It's common for people to practice at home, and then you start presenting, and then you just get nervous and it all goes out the window. The more you practice, the less likely you will be to go off on tangents. Your visual cues will help here. So your visual guide should help you to stay on topic. And the more practice you have, the more you'll know what's coming up next. So your segues can be better. By the way, segues aren't just those little scooters, the two-wheeled scooters that you stand up on. Segue is when you move from one topic to another. That's a segue. The more presentations you give, the better you're going to get. This is a skill that you can generate over time. You can build it, practice it, build it up. This is not something you're going to be great at right away. You do not want to give your presentation for the first time in front of a live audience. Okay? So write your presentation, practice your presentation at home, practice it again and again and again. And then when you're comfortable with it, then maybe it's ready for a live audience. Use visuals sparingly but effectively. Some presenters use a ton of visuals. Others use almost none. Some people can captivate an entire audience with no visuals at all. That's very rare. If you use visual aids in your presentation, which for this project you will be, make sure the visual aid doesn't override or overpower what you're talking about. Also, don't just put everything you want to say on the slide and then just read the slides out loud. You'll notice that when I give these presentations, I'm using what's on the slides as a guide to help me remember what I want to say. The words that I'm saying right now are not on the slide that we're talking about right now. I am not just reading these slides word for word, but every once in a while, I will dip back in and read what's on the slides because it's important information that I need to know, right? Don't overload your visual with a bunch of text and a bunch of images that aren't necessary. Remember those 3 points. Make the 3 points as clear as possible, okay? Eliminate vocal tics and mannerisms. We all know that when we speak, there are certain things we do that make us comfortable with how we're talking. For me, as you'll notice in that last sentence, there were a couple of pauses. I pause a lot when I'm speaking. I try to avoid saying or as much as I can. And normally when I would say I usually pause and think about what I'm going to say next. This is just my style of speaking. Some people replace that pause because they're uncomfortable with it with or something like that. If that becomes a habit of yours in a presentation, some people in your audience will pick up on it and they will focus on it and they'll even count how many times you do it. Okay? This is something that you're going to do. You are going to give a lot. You're going to say a lot of like, I do the like. You're going to fill in those gaps with words that are more comfortable for you and you don't have to think about while your brain does some thinking and try to figure out what you're going to say. Now, mannerisms don't just mean things that you say to fill in gaps. They can also be vocal tics. Vocal tics are one thing, mannerisms are another thing. Mannerisms can be distracting as well. If you sway back and forth when you're talking a lot, if you're constantly like playing with your hands when you're talking a lot, you're doing a lot of this, or you're cracking your knuckles the entire presentation, right? You're doing this all day. Or you have your hands in your pockets, right? Or, any of this stuff. Anything that's distracting is going to take away from your presentation. A good idea is just to stand in one spot, kind of fold your hands in some way in front of you, use your hands every once in a while to highlight a point, and move around a little bit in the room. Stay within a pretty reasonable range. Don't be running back and forth across the stage. Kind of just pace back and forth in random ways, not in a way that's, pace, because that's going to get annoying. Just kind of move around, use your hands every once in a while, but then whenever you're done, hands come back in front of you and you can kind of just keep them there. So, all this stuff that we've just talked about, this is all just a skill that you need to cultivate over time. You're not going to be perfect at this at the very beginning. If you ever watch me give a live lecture, which is essentially just an oral presentation, you will see there I break tons of these rules, right? It happens. I get distracted. I tell stories. I tell a joke that doesn't work. That happens to me a lot. I use and I pause too much or whatever. I've been doing this for a long time. You're not going to be perfect at it. Just know that as long as you are trying and I can see you're making an effort, you're going to be just fine. And most audiences are going to give you that kind of grace and understanding as well. If they can see that you are making an effort to be as professional as possible, then they're going to extend to you the courtesy of assuming you did the best you could, right? So again, no one's expecting perfection here. I just want to see you try. Okay? Perfect. Now you are ready to start preparing, putting together your oral presentation that you are going to give. I'm very excited to see what you come up with, and I cannot wait for you to give your presentation. Once we're done, then we're moving on to term 2. All right. See you later. Peace.